G'day and welcome back to my workbench. Now, I have got here today my cordless compressors with our water airbrushes on them. It's been just over a year since I first tried this whole experiment of going cordless, and to the most part I've stuck with these cordless airbrushes. There's only been a couple of times where I've needed to use the old floor compressor and hook it up, and really that was more of I wanted to do a specific thing and I was pushing the limits of what these airbrushes could do. Well, not the airbrushes, what these compressors can do. Let's be clear, it's really the cordless compressor that I'm testing. The airbrush that came with it, I've tested those in previous videos. All I want to talk about this time is the performance of the compressor, especially after I've added my water airbrushes, which has made them much more usable and versatile. But there are some problems. Would you like to know about that? Great. Roll the music. Now, if you've seen the previous videos, I had an earlier version of this black one, which doesn't have the scallop out and didn't have the removable batteries, and it burnt out in the first week. But that was mainly my fault. I was trying to see how long you could basically continuously spray for, so I left it going. I kind of clicked it on, left it sitting there, walked out the room, came back half an hour later. It was still spraying, but it didn't sound very healthy, and I burnt the battery out, and it couldn't be replaced. So you have to be careful with these guys. The good thing about the white one is you can't really leave it and walk away. It cuts out as soon as you stop spraying, because if you've seen the previous videos, it only works when you push down. Okay, whereas the black one, nothing, you've got to turn it on. So you could leave this one going, and then it would be very, very upset if you leave it for too long. That hasn't happened because I've been careful with my use of these, and I've made sure that I keep my sessions short, and then I let them rest and charge them up. Charging is very interesting. I literally have never flattened the white one, and this is the Noname brand, right? And that became my workhorse for quite some time. I was using it pretty well all the time before I got this replacement black one here, which I got from Neat and Handy. So I kind of kept using this one, especially after I worked out how to fit my Neo, it's an iWater Neo, directly to it. And I had to make a special little adapter sort of plunger in there, which I've shown in previous videos, I think. I think I have. If not, let me know and I'll show you how to make one. But I made a little adapter that goes inside there, and that allowed me to fit the Neo directly to this one and still have that action. So this one is great in that it's only working when you need it to, so you've got full control. You're tapping down, it's going, and therefore this is the more user-friendly. I really like this one. It's great for doing all kinds of things. Now, I did manage to do the camo on my catsuit. I did that early on, actually, last year, and I had great control there, and that was, was very usable. I had enough pressure. In fact, I had to use the low pressure mode because I found out after a while there's a little button down here which I thought only lit up the lights to tell you how much battery there is. I mean, that's still sitting on 4 bars, even though it's been sitting on the shelf for about a month. I haven't used it. So, all right, and you tap it again, you get a different sound. So you got low speed and high speed. So low speed is quite good for doing, well, if you're doing sort of a finer work or you just want a very light coat on something. So I did a lot of that when I did the Schnell boat. So with the Schnell boat, I painted a lot of that, the deck and the details like the red stripes. I didn't want a lot of pressure. I just wanted to be very careful how I put down my layers of paint, and I had them thinned quite a lot. So, a lot of thinner, low pressure. That's what you want. So I had some pressure control, which is the one thing that is the biggest complaint. People want to put pressure valves on these things, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. Once you start adding attachments and everything, they don't work as well because there's only a limited amount of oomph that can come out of this tiny little compressor. So the more things you add, like people want to add air hoses to them. Well, if you're going to add an air hose to it, Stick it on a decent compressor and be done with it. Don't waste your time trying to put an air hose on a cordless. Unless for some reason like you're going to shows and you can't plug into 240 volt and power up your big compressor or it'll be too noisy. That's about the only reason I could see to add a little hose, which you could do. I mean, there are adapters and there are, plugs and connectors that you could do all that. But honestly, for the home modeler, and that's what this is basically aimed at, there's no need for a hose. It is pointless. So this was my workhorse, and I also primed the St. Louis with it. I did both sides of the hull with this, on high pressure with Steiner's. Now, it was fully charged. The weather was just right. I think it was, well, it would have been not much different to now. It would have been autumn for us. So it was a balmy day, probably 25 degrees, probably a bit warmer, and the Steiner's was flowing nicely, and therefore the pressure was just enough for me to coat the whole ship. And that's, that was about 2 half-hour sessions to do both sides of the hull, and my battery was still going strong afterwards. However, come winter time here, and I mean our winters aren't that cold, but the colder temperature made my paint probably more coagulate, right? Stick together, become syrupy. And Steiner's is pretty thick stuff for the best of the time, and you don't usually thin it. I mean, it's not advisable to thin it. You spray it neat, even though it's like treacle, and you spray it at a high pressure, and it goes down beautifully. It's a fantastic primer, okay? But this struggled. There was just not enough pressure. So in the end, after it clogging up and causing me so many problems and wondering what the heck's going on, even changing to different airbrushes to think, well, maybe there's something wrong with this airbrush, it might be contaminated. It wasn't. There just wasn't enough oomph out of this compressor in the cold weather for me. So that was interesting. So I did go back to using my Iwater Revolution, which is a 0.5 needle, and I used that on my normal compressor. I even tried this on there, which you sort of can do. You have to use the adapter off the Neat and Handy. So I did try a 0.5 needle on that compressor, but it was just too late by then. It just didn't work. The Steiner's was just too thick. The compressor couldn't push it. It just couldn't push it. So it was all drying inside and clogging up. So that was the thing. If it's too cold, this compressor can't push a big thick paint like Steiner's primer. Everything else was fine though. I was having no trouble. I mean, my life colour that I was using and my Hataka all ran beautifully through this. They were all thinned down nicely. No troubles at all. So that was the one thing that went wrong. I had to go back to my Revolution and my floor compressor just to get that extra oomph and get a whole 40 psi in the cold weather here to push Steiner's. But that was it. I did use the airbrush that came with the white Noname. And I used that for doing things like metallics and clears and the odd thing that was a little bit different, especially if it wasn't water-based, because I stick purely to water-based paints in both of my cordless. Now, I don't just mean acrylic. Acrylic doesn't mean water-based. I've got a whole video on that. You can have acrylics that have lacquer in them. You can have acrylics like Tamiya's, which have got butanol in them. There's a lot of acrylics that have got isopropyl and other alcohols in them. And as I explained in that video I did about acrylics, water-based acrylics and alcohol acrylics in the same airbrush create snot. And this is what happens to a lot of people. They'd use like enamels or Tamiya paint, that sort of thing, and they want to switch to water-based acrylics. And so they put in AK or Vallejo or Ammo MIG or Life Color, and it goes all horrible. And they go, these acrylic paints are shit. Well, they're not. It's chemistry, okay? You can't mix oils and water, and alcohols and water too can sometimes play up. I mean, it's not just the alcohol, it's the alcohol, the resin that is the acrylic part, and all the special sauce. It doesn't mix. Anyhow, enough of that. The black one. Now, I have never ever used enough of this battery to go to the second one. Occasionally I just swap them over because I haven't charged that one, and so I just swap on the other one which is sitting in my drawer charged, and I use this. But I have managed to use this one for doing lots of details. I think I used it to do the ribbing on my W29, which is the Wingnut Wings kit. So using my clips on this one, because I've left the adapter on here so I can use the clips, which also means that I can swap it out and I can put the 0.5 needle or anything that I want, or I can put the needle on this one. This gives a strong, steady push. It's probably between the strong and the weak setting of that, but it's almost like torque. This seems to have a lot more torque. This has some grunt, even though the pressure might not be that high. It just seems to stay and go and go and go. So during my good weather, I can get any kind of paint through this one. It will run Steinerese. And I could put on my Revolution 0.5 needle and it has enough grunt. But not during my winter, so that's very interesting. So maybe I should heat my room more up to a really toasty temperature in winter, and then maybe things might flow and run a little better. I have tried warming up Steinerese by running it under the hot tap, but there's sort of a tipping point, and if you go too far, your Steinerese turns into the most gunky stuff in the world, and I ruined an entire bottle of beige Steinerese, or their yellow primer. It's ruined, and I had to throw it away because it was just, it simply lost its chemistry. I cooked it. So you've got to be very careful warming up Steinerese. Now, I have used both of these on my Amerigo Vespucci, and I managed to get a very nice base coat, and then I also managed to get the fine detail of the stripes without getting too much bleed and all the rest of it. That was down to my masking ability, sure, but the wrong kind of airbrush with the wrong pressure and the wrong kind of paint can be a big mess doing that sort of thing. But I got all those lovely stripes in the Vespucci, and I got all the colour and the detail, and that's coming along. I haven't finished that kit yet, but I'm really enjoying it. I've done lots of little things. I mean, I did all that work on the St. Louis, although quite a bit of it was done with Posca pens, which is a nice way to do very fine lines, especially if they're raised on your kit and you want to pick out detail. Posca pens, they're paint pens, they're not textures. They are brilliant. But I'll do a whole video on those another day. All I wanted to talk to you about today was about the cordless and basically do the 1 year follow-up. I think they're great. I use them every week. I'm probably not a heavy airbrush painter because I do a lot of stuff with my hairy brush, right? I'm quite a detail painter with a hairy brush. And the Posca pens, I use them. So I'm really only using my airbrushes to do sort of feathering work, priming work, trying to get a nice smooth coat on things, that sort of stuff. And in that application, these cordless compressors have been terrific, especially now I have them connected to Iwata airbrushes. So, should you race out and get a cordless airbrush or a cordless compressor with an airbrush? Well, it all depends. I've found them very useful. And they're very inexpensive when you consider the price of a good airbrush and a good floor compressor. So it's a cheap way to get into things and get spraying, because you're going to get an airbrush with the compressor. And if you buy a reasonable quality one, like either of these two, then you're away. You've got a reasonable airbrush. It's not brilliant, but it'll do the job. And you've got all the advantages of a cordless compressor. It's not noisy, so you can basically airbrush anytime. You're not going to annoy your neighbours or your family. It's quite good. It's versatile, it's portable, all those things. Using them, I actually find, without having the hose in the way, I've got more control. And although you've got the height issue, since I've removed I had adapters on there and things before, I removed all that and realised they just need to be clicked to the base of the compressor as much as possible. In the case here, you've got to have this little adapter, but that's it. So as long as you keep them low enough so that you're basically not too high and then you haven't really got control of reach and angle. I also put my models up on a little stand when I'm airbrushing them, which is a good idea, because instead of just looking down and then you miss a whole lot of stuff below, you get a much better view of your model. And I usually have one of those ones, those little Tamiya things that you rotate. So I don't have to touch the model. I just keep rotating it, airbrushing, working my way all over it. So for me, these both been useful, and they're terrific. I probably only needed this one. That's been a nice to have. But there you go. And I've still got the compressor on the floor if I need to push Steinerese or something like that. I mean, you could just use, say, rattle can primer and do that if you want to prime. Nothing wrong with like those Tamiya rattle can primers. They're fantastic. Steinerese, though, well, it has so many good properties, and one day I will make a full video on using Steinerese, because it's been quite a few years now and I'm still sold on it. I still love it. Anyhow, that's my take on these cordless compressors and how they work once you put some really nice airbrushes on them. So I hope that was useful. It's been 1 year and I'm not looking back. I'm still going. We'll see if I'm still here in another year, hey? Yeah, that'll be interesting. Alright, if you liked my video, then please click that like thing, comment if you've got something to say, just be respectful. Subscribe to my channel, that'd be terrific. All those things help me. They help keep the algorithm up and going and all the bots doing all the things that they do, and then I don't starve to death. And if you really like the stuff that I'm doing and you want to support me more, you can go to Patreon or you can become a YouTube member, and there's a whole lot of extra perks there. Alright, that's it for now. So it's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.